Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, America loses a feminist icon. In a moving ceremony, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, or Notorious RBG as she was often referred to, becomes the first ever American woman to lie in state in Washington, D.C. And with the future direction of the US Supreme Court now becoming a major issue in the presidential campaign, we talked to Professor Anne-Marie Goetz, a political scientist from New York University, about where to from here for women's rights in America. Plus, hitting the right note, the Paris Philharmonic is running a conductor competition that aims to give women the same opportunities as their male counterparts. But we begin in the States, where tributes continue to flood in after the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a feminist icon both home and abroad. During her tenure, she decided on some of the most important gender discrimination cases in American history, and also was in support of women's ability to get an abortion. However, a looming confirmation battle for her replacement is causing the debate on reproductive rights to heat up ahead of a hotly contested election.
As soon as her death was announced, hundreds gathered to pay their respects to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, many fearing that her passing could lead to a dramatic shift in women's rights in the country.
Almost every woman I know has either needed an abortion or needed access to emergency contraceptives, or it's tragic. I don't know a woman who's not going to be affected by this.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a longtime defender of women's rights and abortion rights, but her legacy could well be in danger, as President Donald Trump is racing to fill her empty seat at the Supreme Court of the United States before Election Day, November 3rd. If confirmed by the Senate, Trump's candidate would tilt the Supreme Court to a 6-3 conservative majority. Supporters of abortion rights fear that could threaten the future of Roe v. Wade, the landmark 1973 ruling guaranteeing the right to abortions.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg herself didn't like Roe v. Wade because she thought it was too quick, it wasn't incremental enough, and it would be too easily overturned if the balance of the court changed. And we're in a situation now where I don't think it's just a risk, I think it's nearly a certainty.
Abortion remains the most divisive issue in the United States. 77% of Americans believe Roe v. Wade should be upheld, but a strong majority say that they would like to see restrictions added to the ruling.
Joining me now from the States is Professor Anne-Marie Goetz, a former advisor to UN Women and a political scientist at New York University. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Goetz. For people outside of the States, the importance of the Supreme Court in all factors of American life is maybe not that clear, but Justice Bader Ginsburg's death and her replacement is going to have massive ramifications on all levels, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think it's probably difficult for people to understand how the death of one single prominent Supreme Court justice is so enormously consequential for politics in the United States. But the fact is, she's been kind of holding the line on the possibility of liberal jurisprudence in the Supreme Court, as well as feminist jurisprudence, in fact. She and her colleagues on the liberal side in the court were already in a minority. And so it was very much a kind of a holding act. But losing her now is one of the worst things, one of our worst nightmares, actually, that seems to be coming true. And it has enormous implications for the future, not just of women's rights in the United States, but a whole range of other issues, such as labor rights, environmental protections, and above all, and most dangerously right now, voting rights and the consequences of the coming election.
Just how worried should women in America be?
Plenty worried, because what we've seen with the rise of this particular version of the Republican Party, as exemplified by Trump's leadership, is a kind of a politics of masculine restoration that has been building steam for some time in the United States. And of course, The wave very much crested in 2016 with Hillary Clinton's loss to Donald Trump, thanks to the nature of the Electoral College in this country. So women are plenty worried about their rights, and there's been massive mobilization of the feminist movement since, certainly since 2012, but definitely since 2016. Why are we worried? Well, for a start, the landmark judgment in the United States, the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision of the Supreme Court, which legalized abortion, that's already been on life support for some time. Given the liberal minority in the court, it's surprising in some ways that it hasn't been decimated already, but now it's surely gone. The Republicans have made no mistake, no bones about a decades-long struggle since the 80s to pack not just the Supreme Court, but the federal courts with conservative judges, with, it's not a one-point agenda, but it's a pretty dominant agenda to get rid of abortion rights. So that's very clear. There's a lot more to come, however, in terms of the legislative agenda of the far right, the minority.
So in what areas specifically will women be impacted?
There will be a tax on contraceptives access. The 2014 Hobby Lobby decision allowed corporations to deny women health insurance if it was used to cover access to IUDs, for example. So a restriction of contraception is to be expected and terribly worrying. Aside from the courts, the right wing, and particularly the religious right, has been strategically placing individuals in key government departments, especially Health and Human Services and USAID, with regard to the US's foreign policy on women's rights. There's also a lot of concerns about equal pay, and attacks on protections on non-discrimination at the workplace. And finally, still sticking to women's rights, a huge concern is about the application of Title IX provisions around non-discrimination in educational institutions, which has been really important for prosecuting issues of campus rape, sexual assault, or sexual harassment on campus. And the Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos, has been chipping away at protections on women reporting campus rape. So there's plenty of anxiety about this whole range of concerns.
Will her death be enough to rally people to vote?
Of course, Democrats and feminists certainly hope so. But so do Republicans. And so obviously for very different reasons. From the Republican side, her death is a reminder to the Republican base that for decades, there has been this priority of stacking the courts with conservative anti-abortion judges. And anti-abortion activists right now are mobilized to the teeth with the absolute determination to ensure that the executive and the judiciary remain Republican-dominated or conservative-dominated. So it may well rally the Republican base, and you can certainly see that Trump is making that calculation right now. On the Democrat side, similarly, although honestly there is, it's very unlikely that it will be possible to avoid the nomination and at least hearings of a conservative judge to replace Ginsburg, either by or just after the election. You can certainly see that Democrats are extremely mobilized to undertake the long-term institutional changes that have to happen to counter the way that Republicans have step by step, very slowly, altered institutions in their favor. And that goes not just from the court system, but of course, and most notoriously, in terms of district organization for electorals and managing or restricting voting rights.
Professor Goetz, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In other news, France is set to double paternity leave allowance to 28 days, a move that will help bring the country in line with progressive policies elsewhere in Europe. It comes on the back of a commission led by a prominent French psychiatrist who recommended an even longer period of 9 weeks. The old allowance of 14 days dates back to 2002 and at that time was longer than most other European nations. Now, as we've reported before, classical music is very much a male-dominated world, but the Paris Philharmonic Orchestra is trying to change that. La Maestra is a conductor competition that aims to hit all the right notes so that women finally get the same chances as their male counterparts. Jean-Emile Jamin has more.
With the flick of a wrist and the twirl of a baton, La Maestra is recomposing the score, becoming the first exclusively female conducting competition, breaking the mold of an industry still largely dominated by men.
The best thing about this is that these women will be seen by a lot of industry people. So I think that it's going to really exponentially change the field, which is already changing thanks to the Me Too movement.
Held at the Philharmonie de Paris, the competition showcased 12 candidates of the highest caliber, carefully selected from 220 applications and 51 different countries. Several financial prizes were handed out, while each of the competition's 3 winners were offered a program of personalized professional engagements and artistic mentoring to further their careers. This year's champion, Indonesia's Rebecca Tong.
I'm so grateful, especially during this pandemic time, that in Paris they really try to push to set the, like a momentum, to say like it's the time for women conductors to really bloom.
The gap is still wide. Of the 778 permanent professional symphony orchestras in the world, only just over 6% are headed by female conductors. Meanwhile, no permanent state-funded French orchestra can boast a female music director, one of the many statistics La Maestra hopes to consign to the past.
Wonderful to see. And that's it for this edition. You can also connect with us via our Facebook page, that of course being France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. So until our next show, bye for now.